Thank you for tuning in to Blue Dog Radio. This is your host, The Wag. I have mixed opinions of the Young Turks, and today I saw a video that really ticked me off, where they were arguing about abortion, and I'm sure you know they're pro-choice, but it goes beyond that. The Constitution I have read backwards and forwards. I've had every debate you can think of. I know the Constitution like the back of my hand. It's one thing to be pro-choice. It's one thing to feel that abortion should be up to the pregnant person. We shouldn't restrict it because it's their body, etc. If that's your point of view, chances are you don't recognize human life as having begun at conception. You would probably argue it doesn't begin until the third trimester, or maybe it doesn't begin until birth, etc., etc. If that's your view, that's another debate that usually ends up going into where life begins. But whatever your view, pro-life, pro-choice, how about we agree on this? How about we agree that we follow the Constitution rather than ramming our ideas down the entire nation's throat? Even though I am pro-life, I would never support a national ban on abortion, because I've read the 10th Amendment, and the 10th Amendment takes any issue that's not covered in the Constitution and automatically leaves it up to the states. The Founding Fathers knew that it would be impractical to write a Constitution that covers every little issue you can think of, so they covered our basic liberties in the first 9 amendments and throughout the articles, and then they said, you know what, we're not going to think of everything, so if we didn't think of it, we'll just leave it up to the states. That's what the 10th Amendment is all about. So for about 170 years of our nation's history, well, a little longer than that, almost 2 centuries, abortion was regulated by the states. Abortion regulations go all the way back to, I think, about the 1820s. Then the Civil War happened, and we added an amendment, the 14th Amendment. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, but in order to protect these freed slaves, in order to ensure that they were treated fairly, we added the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment is rather long, but basically it guarantees equal protection under the law and that you can't be prosecuted without due process of law. And it guarantees that both the federal government and the states have to recognize that right of anybody born or naturalized in the United States. So, freed slaves having been born here, this effectively gives them citizenship, and it guarantees them equality. For the longest time, that was our understanding of the 14th Amendment, and eventually it was applied to desegregate public schools, which I think makes perfect sense. I'm a strong supporter of the Brown v. Board of Education ruling. But then we get to the abortion issue. In the 60s, it was becoming a really hot topic because slutty feminists were sleeping around and getting pregnant, and they wanted to kill their babies. So, activists who wanted them to have the right to sleep around and kill their babies because, it's just not fair. Men get to sleep around and spread their seed, and we don't have to bear the consequences of being pregnant, but women do. So, biology has created a double standard. So, these activists, in order to push their agenda, in order to create gender equality, rather than warning women about the dangers of sleeping around and not taking proper precautions, they decided that it's better to just kill babies. So, they pushed for a Supreme Court ruling. They knew that the Supreme Court was the only branch that would have the power to do this. Now, there's no constitutional basis for it, but hey, the Supreme Court's the final word on what the Constitution actually says, so the Supreme Court, if they can just come up with some part of the Constitution, twist it all around, they can justify whatever they want, and so they did. In the 70s, we got the Roe v. Wade case, and the Roe v. Wade case argued that a fetus is a piece of property, and no state can deprive a person of their piece of property. Therefore, abortion has to be allowed. They made the kind of right to privacy argument, and by the way, right to privacy in those words is not even in the Constitution. It is something we sort of understand, but the notion of right to privacy is based on the idea that as long as you're following the law, you have the right to privacy. For example, if a police officer pulls you over for no reason and harasses you, he's violated your right to privacy. However, If you are speeding and a police officer pulls you over, you were speeding. You were breaking the law. He had every right to pull you over. So, if states have a law against abortion and you're breaking the law, why doesn't the state have the right to enforce their own laws? Let me read the exact part of the 14th Amendment that's relevant here. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So, some people would go to the life part, deprive any person of life. I've heard pro-lifers argue this and say, therefore, abortion should not be allowed in any state. The problem is, it starts with all persons born or naturalized in the United States. So, I would say that the Constitution does not guarantee you protection unless you're born in the U.S. or naturalized here. And since a fetus is not yet born, I don't think it's covered here. If you want to make the property argument, and get this, this is weird, but I'm actually going to go with their argument this far. I'm going to agree that constitutionally, a fetus is a piece of property. Very strange thing for a pro-lifer like myself to say, I know, but just follow me here. So the fetus is a piece of property according to the Constitution. I don't agree with that biologically, but according to the Constitution it is. And therefore, no state can deprive a person of that fetus or the right to do with the fetus what they want without due process of law. You follow me? Without due process of law. That means if there is a law against abortion, the state has every right to enforce it. Now, what would be unconstitutional is if we did, like, for example, what the Nazis used to do. The Nazis would give different laws to different races. If you're Jewish, yes, please have an abortion. We don't like you people anyway. If you're non-German, well, you're an inferior race, so yeah, we would encourage you to have abortions. If you're German, no, don't have an abortion. You're a part of the superior Aryan race. No abortions for you, unless, of course, there's going to be a severe birth defect, because we want the German race to remain superior. You see, that's the kind of thing that would go against the 14th Amendment, because you're applying different sets of laws for different people, and that would violate equal protection. So if we allowed, let's say, black people to have abortions and not white people, that would go against the 14th Amendment, or vice versa. But as long as the laws apply the same to all people, then equality is respected, and therefore the state has every right to regulate it. I have had idiot pro-choicers just swear up and down that it's protected by this stuff about privacy. They've called me a fascist, and they've asked me to point to the Constitution and say what does give the states the right to regulate abortion. Well, it's simple. The 10th Amendment, and I tell you what, I'm going to actually read that word for word. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. What that means is that if it's not in the Constitution, we automatically go to the states, and if the states don't act on it, then it would be a personal choice. So we assume that people have the right to do it unless there's a law against it. If there's a law against it by the states, then basically the states are not allowed to violate the federal Constitution, but as long as they're not in violation of it, they have the right to regulate it. That's the default setting. That's what our founding fathers came up with. That's all the evidence I need that abortion is a state's right. Those judges were so determined to push this issue on us that they decided to trample on the 10th Amendment and ram their agenda down our throats by twisting the meaning of the 14th Amendment. In conclusion, look, if you are pro-choice and you really want to push for abortion, recognize what's in the Constitution and push for it at the state level. It's just like I tell my gay friends who, want marriage equality. I hear where they're coming from, but look, gay marriage is not in the Constitution, so it's up to the states. If you guys want marriage equality, you need to push for it state by state. Don't ram this issue down the nation's throat by twisting the Constitution. If we keep doing this, the Constitution's just not going to have any meaning anymore. And then what's to stop a state like Arizona from passing a law that a cop can pull you over if you have brown skin and start asking you all kinds of questions? Hey, boy, what you doing in my country? You look like you from Mexico. Let me see your ID, boy. Well, that don't look like you. That looks like a Puerto Rican. You steal that from a Puerto Rican? And then he harasses him for the next 2-3 hours just because he doesn't like Mexicans. You know, Arizona almost passed a law like that, and then Obama threatened a lawsuit, and they kind of scaled it down a little. Obama's still suing them because he doesn't even like the scaled-down version. But my point is, we need the Constitution, and we do need the Supreme Court to be able to nullify any law that goes against the Constitution. And pulling people over for having brown skin clearly goes against the Equal Protection Clause. But what we don't need is judicial activists, people who become judges not to follow the Constitution, but to push their particular agenda on everybody. Pro-life, pro-choice, pro-gay, anti-gay, whatever. We need to all agree that we follow the Constitution, and these wedge issues that aren't really covered in the Constitution, let every state decide for themselves. Thank you so much for tuning in to Blue Dog Radio. This is the WAG signing off.